What if I told you that being smart isn't enough, that in fact, it could be your greatest weakness? In a world overflowing with noise, where information shouts from every screen and every scroll brings a new fact or opinion, intelligence alone is cheap. A quick search can give you answers, but wisdom, true wisdom, the kind that tells you when to act, when to stay silent, what to say, and what to ignore, is incredibly rare, and it always has been. The Stoics never aimed to impress with degrees, titles, or endless debates. They didn't care how many books you'd read or how many people you could outtalk in a room. Their focus was something far deeper: the ability to see reality with clarity and to respond with calm, integrity, and strength. To become dangerously smart means transcending the shallow pride of intellect. It's not about knowing more trivia than others, it's about cutting through the fog of emotion, distraction, and manipulation with razor-sharp insight. It's about becoming psychologically unshakable, a mind that can't be baited, emotions that stay grounded, even under extreme pressure, a spirit that remains still, even when the world shakes. It's walking into a room and sensing unspoken tension before a single word is said. It's catching the flicker of deception in someone's eye. It's navigating complexity like someone who has studied chaos and knows its every move. A dangerously smart person sees what others don't. They read people with surgical precision. They control their impulses. They gather knowledge not to boast, but to hone judgment. They're not just survivors, they make adversity second-guess itself. Their power isn't loud, but it's always felt. Their wisdom is silent but sharp, like a blade kept ready, not for show, but for action. The Stoics laid the foundation for this powerful form of intelligence. They believed self-awareness was the entry point to wisdom. They taught the discipline of desire, emotional restraint, and deliberate action. They urged learning across all areas: philosophy, science, art, politics, war, ethics, because they understood that life doesn't present a single type of battle. It throws them all at you, often at once. To walk the Stoic path is to train every part of yourself: your mind, your words, your reactions, your instincts. It means never stopping your education, never lowering your awareness, and never allowing your internal world to be ruled by anything beyond your control. This isn't arrogance, it's preparedness. It's a mindset of constant refinement, a sharpening of a weapon that can't be seen, but is always sensed. And it all begins with one essential step. Chapter 1. Build the inner citadel. The Stoics called it the inner citadel, a mental fortress, so disciplined, so inwardly fortified, that no insult, no defeat, no praise, and no lie could breach its walls. It wasn't an escape from the world, but a position of immovable control within it. This citadel isn't built overnight. It's crafted brick by brick. The foundation of dangerous intelligence. Building the inner citadel doesn't happen in a single moment. It's not a lightning strike of enlightenment, it's a slow, deliberate construction, brick by brick. And each brick is laid through clarity of emotion, mental discipline, and deep philosophical reflection. This is where true intelligence begins, not in knowing more, but in mastering yourself, in filtering your thoughts, choosing your responses, and refusing to be pulled into reactive chaos, every time you pause before speaking, every time you take a breath before snapping back, every time you ask yourself, is this within my control? You're not just calming yourself, you're sharpening the blade of your mind. In that subtle pause between stimulus and reaction, a space opens up, and it's in that space where real power takes root, not power over others, but over the only realm you truly own, your inner world, your soul. But let's be clear, emotional mastery isn't about becoming cold or numb. That's a common misconception. The Stoics never said to feel nothing. On the contrary, they taught us to feel fully, but without letting those feelings dictate our actions. Emotional discipline is not suppression, it's recognition. It's awareness. And awareness gives you leverage. When you can name what you're feeling, whether it's a burst of anger, a flicker of jealousy, or a sudden wave of insecurity, you rob those emotions of their power to hijack your reason. That's intelligence. And when you can stay aware and stay in control, that's dangerous intelligence. It's the kind that allows you to walk through fire without catching flame. And that inner strength doesn't stay hidden, it radiates outward. When you've brought order to your internal world, your perception of the external one sharpens. You stop projecting. You stop assuming. You stop reacting to ghosts. Instead, you start seeing reality for what it is. You observe instead of judge. You listen not just to words, but to the silences between them. You hear the hesitation in someone's tone, the flicker in their eyes when they lie, the subtle stiffness in their shoulders when they feel threatened. And as your mind quiets down, free from the static of insecurity or the noise of ego, you begin to really listen, not waiting for your turn to speak, not rehearsing your comeback. You listen with presence, with full attention. You catch what's not being said because now you can dot, and in that stillness, something shifts. You become unreadable to those who rely on predictability, but you become highly attuned to others, seeing beyond words into motive, insecurity, or manipulation, not to control them, but to keep yourself free. This isn't about playing games. It's about being unshakably present, grounded, anchored. You can't be pulled off center by chaos or provoked by noise. And that centeredness, that's where power lives. You're no longer ruled by ego or baited by drama. You don't chase validation or crumble under rejection. Compliments and criticisms alike pass through you like passing weather, not ignored but no longer defining. You begin to live by internal standards, not public applause, guided by principle, not popularity. That's what makes you formidable. That's what gives your presence weight without trying. People notice, not because you demand attention, but because stability is magnetic. You walk with ease. Why? Because your mind is no longer at war with itself. The presence that speaks without words, since you've mastered your inner world, something shifts. You no longer feel the need to prove anything to anyone. Why? Because your sense of worth is no longer up for negotiation. It's solid. It's sovereign. You speak only when it matters. You act with clarity, not to impress, but with purpose. And your power, you hold it close, not from secrecy, but from strength. This restraint becomes a kind of quiet elegance. You walk into a room without fanfare, without the urge to dominate, yet somehow people notice. They feel something. They watch how you wait before speaking, how you assess with calm eyes. They feel the weight of your stillness, even if they can't explain it. They sense something unshakable in you, like you've done work most never dare to do. Why is that? Because true presence is rare. In a world addicted to stimulation, distraction, and performance, to be grounded is to be extraordinary. In a culture obsessed with appearing smart, actual depth becomes rare. But clarity, real clarity, cuts through the fog. It's magnetic. It draws people in. The one who sees clearly, who sees through illusion and noise, that person becomes a guide, a compass. But that kind of clarity doesn't shout. It doesn't show off. It simply exists. Calmness in a frantic world is strength. It's not weakness or passivity. It's stored power. Power that waits, watches, weighs. The calm presence you carry becomes a kind of safe harbor. Others are drawn to it, not because you have all the answers, but because in your presence, the chaos around them suddenly feels manageable. They come to you for more than words. They come for perspective, for steadiness, for the quiet certainty in your voice when everything else is shaking. Your calm becomes their mirror, their anchor. And here's the truth. People trust you not because you talk the most, but because you're unshaken by the noise. Your steadiness whispers of a mind that has faced storms and remained standing. Your very presence becomes a silent teacher, not through flashy speeches, but through the subtle consistency in your behavior. How you breathe, how you listen, how you hold silence with confidence. In a world screaming for attention, your stillness speaks louder than words. You become the eye of the storm, the flame that doesn't flicker, the unmoved mover. This is the first and most essential layer of dangerously sharp intelligence, self-mastery, forged in silence, built when no one's watching, tested in the quiet moments when restraint feels like a battle. It is not defined by how loudly you speak, but by how deeply you stay rooted. It's when your silence carries more weight than someone else's shouting. When your calm presence brings stability to chaos. This is the edge that few ever develop. The presence that shapes an entire room without raising its voice. The silent signature of a mind that has studied itself, struggled through the shadows and emerged not just whole, but unbreakable. So where do you begin? Start small, start daily. Journal your thoughts each morning. Identify the emotions that dominate your mind and ask yourself why. Learn to respond to tension with a pause. Then train that pause until it becomes automatic. Over time, your impulses will no longer control you. You'll own your responses. Chapter 2. Train your mind like a warrior. A dangerously smart person never waits passively for wisdom to arrive. They pursue it actively, aggressively. They hunt it like a warrior, tracking their most vital resource. Once your curiosity becomes a discipline and your stillness turns into strength, your perception begins to sharpen like a blade. A dangerously smart person doesn't just react in conversations, they read them. They decode emotional patterns in the middle of arguments. They track subtle shifts in tone, the changing undercurrent of intention, and the flickering focus of attention. Every word, every pause, every expression becomes data, not for judgment, but for understanding. They treat daily interactions as a training ground for their evolving wisdom. Learning isn't a chapter in their life. It's the spine of the entire book. Their curiosity is relentless. They find as much fascination in philosophy as they do in physics. They're drawn equally to the mechanics of machines and the mysteries of the mind. For them, every moment is an opportunity to refine thought, to test perception, to evolve. And because of this, they guard their attention with care. Their focus isn't scattered. It's selective, sacred, even. They do not consume information mindlessly. They choose what enters their mind with precision. Their mental world isn't cluttered with noise, it's carved into clarity through intentional thought. The Stoic philosopher Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." This simple sentence holds a deep truth. Most of our pain comes not from what is, but from what we believe about what is. That's why a dangerously smart person trains their mind not just to think, but to think clearly. They learn to detect flawed logic not only in others, but in their own internal dialogue. They don't let their imagination spiral into fear, assumption, or irrational guilt. They don't accept every emotion as truth, they investigate it. They ask, is this feeling grounded in fact or fiction? They interrogate their own beliefs just as sharply as they dissect the arguments of others. They're not trying to always be right, they're trying to see clearly. Their fear isn't in being wrong. Their fear is in staying wrong. Like a warrior who trains every day to stay ready for battle, they train their intellect to remain sharp, steady, and discerning. Not to dominate others in debate, but to remain centered when confusion, manipulation, or deception tries to pull them off course. The goal isn't to win, it's to see. Not to conquer, but to stay unmoved. That's why they study logic, rhetoric, and persuasion. Not just to argue, but to understand. They study the tools that shape human thought, language, emotion, rhythm, repetition, fear. They know the surface. Techniques, yes, but more importantly, they understand the psychology beneath them. They recognize how fear creates urgency, how repetition cements belief, how vague words are used to hide intent, how emotionally charged metaphors bypass logic and plant ideas straight into your subconscious. And they train themselves to spot these tactics everywhere, in conversation, in advertising, in speeches, in institutions, even in contracts, cults, and campaign slogans. They study propaganda. They dissect courtroom arguments. They analyze ancient oratory and modern marketing. They listen to statesmen and tyrants alike, searching not for charisma, but for structure, for the moment when a phrase, perfectly timed, changes everything. Because they know language is not just a tool, it's the operating system of the human mind. So they train in truth. They don't just spot lies, they dismantle them gently. They don't humiliate, they reveal. They don't overpower, they awaken. Their clarity doesn't crush, it disarms. And often, it doesn't even need to be loud. When lies are spoken, they don't react with rage, they respond with reason. Their words carry weight not because they're forceful, but because they're anchored in something real. In that moment, the room shifts, people pause, people reflect, not because they were shouted into silence, but because truth landed quietly and rang louder than any scream. discernment. The silent edge when your words have weight when they simplify complexity and expose truth. People can no longer hide behind their illusions. But this power is not about humiliating others. It's not about winning for the sake of ego. It's about protecting your peace. It's about drawing intellectual boundaries firm, clear lines that few dare to cross. It's about becoming the guardian of your own clarity, the defender of your mental sovereignty. You begin to recognize that every word you speak sends out a ripple. Every sentence you choose carries momentum. You don't throw language around carelessly. You wield it with intention. And because of that, your intelligence becomes more than a weapon. It becomes a shield. And, if necessary, it becomes both a sword, but not forged in hostility, forged in thought, in insight, in the sharpened edges of clarity, a weapon of perception that slices through confusion, not through flesh, but through fog. When you understand how language is used, when you can decode manipulation and see through tactics designed to obscure rather than reveal, you gain a rare kind of immunity. You're no longer easily fooled by sophistication dressed in deceit. You're no longer vulnerable to appearances that mask intention. It becomes hard to trick you, hard to provoke you, hard to lure you into reactive games built by insecure minds. You sense manipulation not just in what is said, but in what's carefully left out. You hear the hidden agenda behind the flattering tone. You recognize the desperation buried inside the insult. You see the fear hiding inside overconfidence. And your mind, it doesn't lash out. It doesn't react. It reflects. You pause. You weigh. You respond with precision so sharp, so measured, that those who once sought to challenge you now hesitate. Your clarity becomes a silent wall, an invisible fortress. It weakens the gains of those who rely on confusion and emotional chaos. You become the mind others avoid underestimating. You become the presence that cannot be predicted. You are the quiet voice others defer to, not because you demand respect, but because your very presence commands it. Your opinion holds weight because, when you speak, it's rare and it's real. You don't fill silence just to be heard. Your silence itself is a statement. It makes others question their own convictions, not because you confront them, but because you force them by contrast to confront themselves. This immunity, this steadiness, makes you a threat, but not to the honest. Only to those who depend on ignorance to thrive. You become the light that reveals shadows, the still signal that slices through noise, the calm observer who speaks only when something needs to be said. You're the mirror that reflects distortion back to its source, and masking illusion and revealing only what is real. To the dishonest, you're the most dangerous kind of opponent, the one who doesn't react, the one who can't be baited, the one who can't be deceived. They fear your awareness because it holds them accountable. They fear your words because they cut cleanly through lies. They don't retreat because you attack, but because you simply see. You don't need to shout. Your clarity alone overwhelms their illusion. You don't claim to know everything, but your mind is too steady, too flexible, too self-aware to be trapped. You don't leap to conclusions. You don't cling to assumptions. You allow truth to reveal itself patiently through focused observation. You don't win every argument because that's not the point. But your thinking is too fluid to be cornered, and too grounded to be shaken. You question everything including yourself. And that is what makes you immune to intellectual traps. You are not just intelligent, you are untouchable in the realm where most people collapse, the mind. And this makes you powerful, not because you crush others, but because you can't be crushed, not because you dominate, but because you endure. You become a quiet force unshaken, unprovoked, untouchable. You are feared not for destruction, but for indestructibility. So, how do you reach this level of mental clarity? Start with logic. Learn to spot flawed thinking. Study one logical fallacy each week. Memorize it. Find it in arguments, debates, comment sections, political speeches. Keep a journal. Track how often poor reasoning shows up, how often truth is bent, blurred, or buried. And as your awareness grows, something else happens. People stop being able to confuse you. You become clearer, quieter, and more dangerous than ever before. Chapter 3. The Art of Listening and Silent Observation. One who talks the most rarely learns the most. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." This is not just a quote, it's a principle, a foundation of dangerous intelligence. Because listening isn't passive, it's active. It's one of the most powerful expressions of intelligence. The person who truly listens hears not only what is spoken, but what is implied. They catch what's being held back, what's being softened, what's being disguised. They hear the fear behind the words. They recognize truths that haven't yet surfaced even to the speaker. To listen well is to interrogate silently, not to attack, but to understand. And if you want to become dangerously smart, you must become a master observer. Observation is not just about paying attention to words. It's about reading what's invisible to most people. It's about picking up signals that others miss because they're too busy preparing their next line, or waiting for their turn to speak. Watch behavior like an artist studies a masterpiece patiently, deliberately, searching for detail. Notice not just what people say, but how they say it. What words do they repeat? What words do they avoid? Look at their posture, upright or slouched, open or closed off. Pay attention to tone. Does it tighten when they lie, soften when they feel guilty, rise when they're unsure? Look into their eyes. Do they drift or hold your gaze? Are they steady or searching the room for safety? People leak truth in the gaps between their words. Their gestures often betray more than their language. A nervous tap, a shifting glance, a tightening jaw. These reveal discomfort before a single word is spoken. Their pace, their breath, the rhythm of their speech, these are all part of the language behind the language. Even their pauses speak. A long silence after a direct question can be more revealing than any detailed answer. But only the trained mind can catch these subtle signals. Only those who have practiced stillness, who enter conversations not as performers but as students, can decode what lies beneath the surface. Because this kind of perception, it doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from awareness, from choosing to be fully present, from listening not just with the ears, but with the whole body, eyes, posture, breath, and intuition. To be dangerous in conversation is not to overpower, The room with noise it is to command it with insight. To dominate not through volume, but through presence. The truly dangerous speaker doesn't interrupt. They wait. They listen. They absorb everything and speak only when they've understood it all. The person who can read a room in silence becomes the one people turn to. When confusion breaks the flow, the one others defer to, not because they force it, but because clarity is magnetic. Listening reveals patterns, emotional rhythms, motivations. It shows you where someone is coming from and where they're headed. It shows what they fear, what they long for, what they hide. It reveals not just miscommunication, but the roots of it. Let your silence speak first, since you've trained yourself to listen, not just with your ears, but with full body awareness. You begin to see what others miss. Pride, insecurity, haste. These are the roots of most conflict. Not disagreement, but misinterpretation. The skilled listener sees past the noise and resolves what others escalate. And when they finally choose to speak after observing, absorbing, understanding, their words land. They don't add to the noise, they cut through it, like a well-honed blade slicing cleanly through tangled fabric. They bring clarity where there was only confusion. These words are not spoken out of ego. They are not laced with insecurity. They are not thrown into the air just to prove a point. They are necessary, not performative. They come not from impulse, but from insight. They are shaped not by urgency, but by discernment. And here's the secret. It's your silence that gives those words their power. People feel your presence before they ever hear your voice. They sense the gravity behind it. They recognize that when you do speak, it's not a reaction, it's a revelation. You don't speak just to participate. You speak to illuminate. Your words are not emotional flares, quickly sparked and soon forgotten. They are distilled, grounded, potent, refined by patience, and forged in the discipline of quiet thought. They echo the strength of someone who isn't just informed, but deeply rooted. Your speech reflects not just your knowledge, but your character, because you're not trying to win the moment. You're not chasing applause or proving your worth. You're placing stones, building clarity, one sentence at a time. Each word is measured, intentional, anchored. That's why people lean in, not because you're loud, but because you've earned the room's attention through your restraint. You carry your silence like armor. And when you finally draw your sword, your speech, it's only because it's needed. Not to attack, but to resolve, to cut confusion, to reset the energy of the moment. Because when you speak, you don't feed the chaos, you end it. You don't talk to dominate, you speak to define. You speak not from ego, but from purpose, not from pressure, but from calm. And in a world overflowing with noise, that difference? It's thunderous. It's the difference between someone who is merely informed and someone who is wise. This is what true conversational dominance looks like. It's not about how many words you speak. It's about how much value you bring when you do. It's not interruption. It's precision. It's not aggression. It's awareness, refined into insight. You become the one others pause for, the one whose voice shifts the entire tone of the room. Because the most respected voice is rarely the loudest, it's the most thoughtful. It's the one that brings direction instead of noise. stability instead of tension, clarity instead of clutter. And sometimes it only takes one sentence, one quiet, deliberate sentence that cuts through the fog and anchors the room. Because in that one sentence lies the kind of intelligence that doesn't need to shout. It's always heard because it's always felt. This is the kind of speech that carries weight, born of silence, grounded in strength, delivered with intention. So, in your next conversation, speak less. Let silence do the heavy lifting. Let your role shift from speaker to observer. Don't spend the time mentally composing a clever reply while the other person is still talking. Instead, listen fully, intentionally, quietly. Observe not just their words, but their energy. Where do they hesitate? Where do they rush? Do their hands move restlessly when a certain subject comes up? Do their shoulders tense at the mention of a particular name? These small tells? They're windows into the unspoken. When you pay close attention not just to words, but to everything beneath them, you begin to read people on a different level. Notice what triggers them. Watch how their breathing shifts when a topic touches a nerve. Do they raise their voice? Lower it? What phrases do they keep returning to, almost like a reflex? Ask yourself, what are they trying to protect? What are they avoiding? What is it they deeply want, even if they can't say it out loud? Train yourself to read the hidden story behind their words. Treat body language like a second script running beneath the verbal one, full of clues. Emotional undertones, guilt, pride, hesitation, envy drift beneath the surface like currents beneath calm water. Pick up on them. Let those currents shape your understanding. And when you speak, don't just reply, reflect, recognize, reveal. Let your response show that you didn't just hear what they said, you understood what they meant. Let your words show that you saw deeper than the conversation itself. This is how trust is built, not with flattery or noise, but with quiet presence and thoughtful response. This is how respect is earned, not just through listening, but through speaking with precision. In a world obsessed with constant chatter, choose to master the art of silence. And speak only when your words bring clarity, not clutter. Chapter 4. Read, learn, absorb everything. Stoics were never narrow in their knowledge. They didn't just study philosophy. They studied law, nature, politics, history, and human behavior. Why? Because they understood something most people still overlook. Wisdom is not found in isolation. It lives in connection. The Stoics saw how everything is woven together. How a lesson in physics could illuminate ethics. How a battle in history could inform a decision in leadership. How the cycles of nature mirrored the rhythms of the human mind. They saw all knowledge as a living system, interconnected, interdependent. And they believed the wise person finds value in every field. So if you want to be dangerously smart, you must become the kind of person who never stops learning. Not because you have to, but because you're too curious to stop. A curiosity that burns through boredom. A curiosity that turns every moment into a classroom. Every failure into data. Every conversation into a study. Read constantly. Read broadly. Read with hunger. Feed your intellect with diversity. Study the ancient and the modern, the abstract and the concrete, the obvious and the obscure. Don't just read science for facts, read it for its discipline. For the way it trains your mind to ask better questions and doubt easy answers. Study strategy, not just in games or in war, but in leadership, decision-making, and navigating pressure with calm. Study psychology, not to manipulate but to understand the architecture of the soul. The patterns of fear, desire, motive, and memory that drive every action. Study religion and mythology, not necessarily to believe but to understand the moral and symbolic frameworks that have shaped entire civilizations. Because the stories we inherit shape the choices we make. Learn mechanics, medicine, and mathematics so your thinking can be both grounded and agile. Understand the world from the smallest particle to the largest political system. Build a mental library that spans disciplines. Become the kind of person who can speak to a poet and an engineer with equal clarity, equal curiosity, and equal respect. Don't run from complexity. Pursue it. The subjects that intimidate you, those are the ones that will expand your thinking the most. Learn economics to understand human incentive. Learn geography to understand how terrain shapes history. Learn technology to stay fluent in the language of the modern world. Understand how software is built, how supply chains function, how human migration reshapes culture, how ideas spread, adapt, or die. Study music theory to see how structure and emotion work in harmony. Study architecture to see the discipline required to make beauty stand. Because even beauty needs structure, even emotion needs form. The more you learn, the more patterns you'll see. And the more patterns you see, the deeper your wisdom becomes. Study beauty not just to admire it, but to understand its structure. Study astronomy to be reminded viscerally that you are a small, yet essential part of something unimaginably vast. Read poetry and code. Decode metaphors and formulas. Explore both myth and mechanism. Let your curiosity bridge the mystical and the mechanical. Let yourself be humbled by everything you don't yet know. And let that humility become fuel, driving you to learn more, not out of ego, but out of awe. Never let your mind grow stale. Let it breathe. Let it stretch. Let it be alive. The dangerously smart individual is not just a thinker. They are a living library, a walking encyclopedia of hard-won understanding. Their mind doesn't just hold knowledge, it holds blueprints. For action, for clarity, for philosophy, for practical execution. They aren't locked into one perspective. They shift paradigms. They adapt. They don't just recite facts, they construct frameworks. They don't fear complexity, they welcome it, because their knowledge is not decorative. It's not for show, it's functional, it's strategic. It's dangerous not because it controls others, but because it frees them. Why? Because knowledge is preparation. It is a shield against chaos. It is armor against manipulation. It is structure in a world that often feels like freefall. When life unravels, a dangerously smart mind doesn't panic. It processes. It reorients. It doesn't default to fear. It reaches for mental tools, for frameworks, for strategy, for clarity. It turns obstacles into puzzles and crisis into an opportunity for redirection. When someone tries to deceive you, your knowledge will dismantle their illusion quietly, gracefully. You won't shout, You'll simply see through it. You'll recognize the flawed structure of their argument and take it apart with calm precision. When someone comes to you in chaos, seeking guidance, your inner library will answer, not with vague platitudes, but with tailored clarity, not with shallow advice, but with deep insight, relevant, grounded, and sharp. You become a source of calm in the storm, a voice of orientation in the fog. Others seek you out not for perfect answers, but for a perspective that resets their own thinking, for a compass, for a moment of mental stillness. This is what the Stoics pursued. Their knowledge was never fueled by arrogance. It was rooted in humility. They saw themselves not as masters of wisdom, but as students of life. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, yet he journaled daily like a humble disciple, constantly reminding himself of what he didn't yet understand, what needed work, what was still unclear. Epictetus was born into slavery, yet he taught emperors, not through status, but through clarity, through presence, through wisdom earned in silence, not granted by birth. Their humility kept them learning, their learning kept them grounded, and their grounding made their intelligence truly dangerous. They did not learn to appear wise, they learned to become better humans, because to them, learning was not a means to perform. It was a sacred responsibility, a lifelong journey, an unfolding dot. It wasn't about appearing clever in conversation. It was about building discernment in silence. That mindset, that's what transforms intelligence into power. It's what turns smart into formidable. A dangerously smart person never assumes they know enough, but they never forget what they've already learned either. They sharpen the mind like a blade, they polish the soul like a mirror, and they stay ready not just to react to the world, but to shape it. So begin now. Set a goal. Read one book per month from a different subject. Keep a notebook, write down key insights. Make connections across fields. Try to see how each idea links back to Stoic thought. Over time, your learning will stop being random. It will become a system, one that supports not just how you think, but how you live. Chapter 5. The language of influence. As your mental library expands, you become not just knowledgeable, but indispensable. But knowledge alone isn't enough. To truly move the world, you must learn to speak to it. Because words are not just sounds. Words are tools. Words are weapons. They can build empires or end them. They can ignite revolutions or dissolve tension. They can break chains or quietly forge them. To be dangerously smart means becoming fluent in the language of influence. Not just knowing what to say, but when to say it, how to say it, and sometimes what not to say at all. Words, in the hands of the undisciplined, are noise. But in the hands of the focused, the calm, the intentional, they become instruments of impact. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one, because actions always speak louder. But when words reflect true action, when speech and integrity are aligned, that's when words become magnetic. When you live what you say, people listen, not because you speak the loudest, but because you speak with weight, with depth, with earned clarity. You become the person people turn to when others are just filling the air with opinion. You cut through fog. You don't add to it. And it all begins with awareness. Start by learning to read the tone of a room. Before you speak, listen, observe the emotional climate. Is the energy tense, defensive, curious, open? Words don't live in a vacuum. They land in emotional ecosystems. And if you want your message to resonate, you need to sense the room before you speak into it. Understand timing. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. Let silence do its work. Other times, a single sentence, delivered with poise, can shift the emotional temperature of an entire group. Knowing when to speak and when to pause, when to challenge, and when to exit a conversation with grace. That's not just social skill. That's wisdom in motion. Influence doesn't mean domination. It's not about overpowering. It's about guiding without force. Learn to persuade not through pressure but through clarity. Not by raising your voice but by sharpening your thought. Be the one who simplifies what others complicate. Who says what others are afraid to say. Who diffuses conflict not by avoiding it, but by navigating it with insight. Clarify without condescension. Calm without invalidating. Disagree without aggression. Because precision is power. Aggression is just noise. The person who can speak with clarity, calm, and conviction becomes a stabilizing force in chaotic moments. They become the anchor in the room. They don't just contribute to the conversation, they shape it. Their words bring calm to panic, structure to uncertainty, perspective to confusion. They sculpt the energy of the room before they've even spoken a word, simply through their presence. To influence doesn't mean to manipulate. It means to elevate the conversation. It means to enter disagreement with dignity, to reveal truth not by shaming but by shining light, to untangle knots not through brute force but through understanding. The kind of influence that lasts is built not on dominance but on respect. And respect is earned, not demanded. When your words flow from inner discipline, people don't just hear you, they trust you. Because they know you don't speak from reactivity. You speak from grounding. You're not parroting borrowed opinions. You're articulating earned insights. And that's why they listen, not because of your charisma, not because of clever phrasing, but because, again and again, you've demonstrated judgment. Through the way you speak, the way you pause, the way you let silence speak when words are not yet necessary. Because ultimately, trust not volume is the foundation of real influence. And at the foundation of it all trust. Trust in your own voice. Trust that your words are honest. That your intent is clean, not manipulative. That your speech is guided by clarity, not ego, not performance. Because true influence is not something you win. It's something you earn slowly, quietly through consistency. It is built through words that cut, not wound. Through wisdom that lands, not lectures that drag on and alienate. Through restraint, because often it's what you don't say that speaks loudest. This is the language of the dangerously smart. The person who doesn't command attention with noise, but leads with weight. Their voice carries further, not because it's loud, but because it rises from a stillness within a depth others can feel but rarely name. So ask yourself, does your tone match your intent? Is it confident, yet humble, calm, yet commanding? Is it grounded in thought or clouded by unexamined emotion? Then look at your pacing. Are you racing through your ideas just to be heard? Or are you letting your words breathe, giving each one space to land, to resonate? Because the rhythm of your voice shapes the experience of your listener. A deliberate pace is not hesitation, it's intention. It's what allows truth to settle in. And then clarity. Are your words precise or vague and foggy? Do your sentences unfold with direction or do they wander? Every sentence should serve a purpose. Every pause should open a space for meaning to rise. Speak less but say more, not in volume, but in substance. Let your words feel chosen, not spilled. Let them arrive as presence, not as noise. The best communicators don't use language like a flood. They use it like a blade, sharp, measured, necessary. You don't need to say many things. You only need to say the right things at the right time in the right way. That's what gives words power, and that's what makes you dangerously smart when you speak. Chapter 6. Build the network of the mind, but dangerous intelligence doesn't flourish in isolation. Even the most brilliant mind needs sharpening. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius often described the universe as a single, living organism, each of us a part of the whole. To grow, we must engage. To evolve, we must connect. But not all connections nourish. Some distract, some drain, some dilute your focus. That's why the dangerously smart person is careful. They don't just build a social circle, they build a mental network, not just of people, but of ideas. Not of comfort, but of challenge. Not of approval, but of growth. They surround themselves with thinkers who sharpen them, not pacify them. With minds that push their limits, test their assumptions, and refine their insights. They don't seek echo chambers, they seek clarity. They invite contradiction not to argue, but to test conviction. They collect minds the way others collect. Trophies not for show, but for function. Because in moments of uncertainty, one right conversation, one good question, can redirect an entire life. But this mental network extends beyond real-time dialogue. It lives in the books you revisit, in the thinkers you study, in the mentors whose voices echo through the pages you underline. Even if you've never met them, their wisdom lives in your mind. With each conversation, each idea, each failure and insight, you add another branch to your mental framework. You begin to build a cathedral of thought, a living map of understanding drawn from many disciplines, many minds. To be dangerously smart is not to hoard brilliance, but to be humble enough to keep seeking it, especially in others. It's knowing who to call, who to read, who to listen to, and when to stay quiet and reflect on your own. Because truly smart people know the mind grows sharpest not in isolation, but in the presence of other sharp minds. Yes, smart people can answer questions, but the dangerously smart, they know which questions to ask, and more importantly, who to ask them to. They don't chase influence, they cultivate wisdom, and they curate their network like a philosopher selects his mentors with care, with discernment, with intention. Build your own personal council of minds. Select 5 thinkers living or dead whose work pushes you, sharpens you, challenges your assumptions. Rotate through their ideas. Let their philosophies collide and contrast. In the pages of your journal, let them argue. Let them refine each other. Then test their insights in the only laboratory that matters, your daily life. Because maturity of thought doesn't come from isolation. It comes from ongoing dialogue with greatness. Chapter 7. Control the frame. Command. The room. There's a simple truth most overlook. He who controls the frame controls the conversation. The Stoics understood this instinctively. They never let others define the rules of engagement. When insulted, they refrained. When provoked, they redirected. When surrounded by chaos, they chose calm instead of reaction. They never let themselves get dragged into emotional chess matches. With unstable minds, they didn't win by overpowering. They won by not playing the game at all. Their power came from emotional detachment, not apathy, but clarity. They refused to be baited. They refused to be framed, because they knew context is power, and the one who shapes perception shapes the outcome. To become dangerously smart is to become a master of framing. It means you define the situation before others define it for you. You don't just answer questions, you ask better ones. You don't react to emotion, you bring it back to logic. You don't fight drama, you redirect it into structure. You shift the lens from accusation to analysis, from conflict to clarity, from reaction to reflection. You don't win because you shout louder. You win because your stillness breaks tension. Your clarity cuts through noise, and your perspective offers what no one else can see. The dangerously smart individual always carries the invisible frame. They walk into a room not to dominate but to guide interpretation. While others obsess over what happened, they ask, "Why does it matter?" While others point fingers, they ask, "What is our responsibility here?" While others spiral, they remain still, anchored in a bigger picture. They see the loaded questions, the false dilemmas, the circular reasoning, and they dismantle them without force, but with elegance. Their responses don't shout but they echo. Their questions don't accuse but they disarm. Their silence isn't passive, it's strategic. It disrupts manipulation because it cannot be pulled into the performance. To control the frame is to control meaning. And when you control meaning, you shape emotion. You redirect not just the conversation, but the energy of the entire room. You don't fight the current. You shift it, like a sculptor carving stone. You shape perception not by pressure, but by placement. You lead minds not through domination, but through subtle direction. You don't impose your vision, you allow others to arrive at it naturally. You set the tone for the entire interaction, not just in what is said, but in how it's interpreted. You don't just bring facts, you bring the lens through which facts are understood. And that is true power. Not the power to control others, but the power to shape perspective with clarity, calm, and unshakable presence. Earlier, we explored how controlling the frame shapes not just conversation, but the entire emotional climate of a room. Now, let's take that deeper. Restraint is your anchor. It allows you to become the filter through which chaos is transformed into order. And this isn't just an external trick, it starts within. The Stoics mastered this first internally, and that's precisely why it worked externally. They didn't just reframe circumstances, they rewrote their entire experience of life. Hardship wasn't an enemy. It was training. Delays weren't frustration, they were discipline. Pain, it wasn't punishment. It was purification. They never denied their suffering. They simply gave it meaning, and in doing so, they robbed it of its power to enslave. Because when you give pain a noble purpose, it can no longer dominate your spirit. This, right here, is narrative mastery, and narrative is the root of all influence. Think about it. The most powerful person in the room is rarely the loudest. It's the one who quietly decides what the moment means, the one who gives the event its shape, its structure, its significance, the one who tells the better stories so clearly, so persuasively that others naturally follow without being pushed. They don't manipulate. They don't overpower. They reveal. They offer a better lens, one that reframes fear into focus, rejection into redirection, and struggle into refinement. They become the architect of perception, not by controlling others, but by illuminating truth. What others see as disorder, they see as data. Where others panic, they extract meaning. They don't run from difficulty, they name it, define it, and place it where it belongs. That single act, placing hardship in a better frame, can instantly change the emotional temperature in a room. Because influence isn't always in what you say. Often, it's in how you shape what is felt, interpreted, and remembered. It's the invisible structure behind your words, the silent strength behind your presence, the intentional quiet that surrounds your speech. True influence is never about being the loudest voice. It's about being the one who brings resonance, the one who provides sense when everyone else feels lost. It's not about being right. It's about being clear. It's about offering meaning when others only offer noise. Change the story, and you change the outcome. Shift the frame, and the entire battlefield moves. Redefine the moment, and the energy around it bends toward clarity. This is power that doesn't shove, it pulls. This is the quiet authority of those who master the frame. Not with intimidation, but with vision. Not with manipulation, but with meaning. The dangerously smart don't argue to win. They reshape the entire story in which others are thinking. So, next time you face disagreement, don't escalate. Reframe. Shift the ground beneath the conflict. Change the context before you address the content. Ask yourself, what are we really talking about here? Find the hidden premise. Uncover the assumption beneath the surface, and then challenge it. But do it as an invitation, not an attack, because often it's not the facts that cause tension. It's the frames that clash. Expose the difference gently. Let your calmness do the talking. Let your questions guide, not trap. Ask not to corner, but to expand. Ask not to win, but to illuminate. You'll notice something profound. The tone shifts. The emotional charge fades. People stop fighting and start thinking. When others get loud, get still. When they rush, slow down. When they react, get precise. Because influence doesn't come from being the first to speak. It comes from being the one who's understood. Best. Chapter 8. Stay dangerous. Stay curious. The most influential person in the room isn't the one who shouts the loudest. It's the one who makes the most sense. Because sense builds trust. And trust, especially in disagreement, is the true foundation of leadership. So how do you stay sharp enough to always make sense? Curiosity. Curiosity is the mind's fire. Without it, intelligence begins to cool. And when knowledge cools too much, it hardens into arrogance, into fixed ideas, into brittle ego, into dangerous certainty. A sharp intellect without curiosity isn't strength, it's stagnation. It becomes rigid, inflexible, blind to growth. But when that same intellect is paired with curiosity, it becomes fluid, dynamic, ever-evolving. It becomes dangerous in the best way. The Stoics understood this better than most. They stayed curious about everything: life, death, nature, fate, the gods, human desire, their own limitations. They knew that once you stop asking questions, you stop expanding. And to stop expanding is to start dying intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually. To be dangerously smart, you must remain endlessly curious, but not scattered curious, strategically curious. Curious with purpose. You walk through life with a question always humming in the back of your mind. What am I not seeing yet? What have I assumed without testing? That single mindset keeps you a step ahead of complacency. Because, let's be honest, curiosity doesn't weaken conviction. It refines it. A belief that's never been questioned. That's not conviction. That's habit in disguise. But a belief that has been interrogated, stretched, tested, and still holds. That's not just confidence. That's wisdom, forged in the fire of challenge. Curiosity invites you to throw your own beliefs into that fire, not to destroy them, but to discover what's real beneath the ego. What collapses under scrutiny? What stands tall? What transforms into something deeper once the surface is stripped away? The dangerously smart don't just explore new ideas, they interrogate their own. They don't worship their past insights, they update them regularly. They return to old thoughts the way a master builder inspects a bridge. If a beam is cracked, they reinforce it. If the foundation shifts, they adapt the entire structure. They're not afraid of being wrong. They're afraid of standing still. They'd rather be uncomfortable than intellectually comfortable. They'd rather be challenged than stale. Their ideas are strong not because they defend them with pride, but because those ideas have been purified by pressure, revised by experience, and tempered by humility. But curiosity isn't just for growth, it's for protection. It protects you from stagnation, from the silent erosion of insight. It defends you against dogma, the rigid thinking that happens when you no longer test what you believe. It shields you from the deadliest danger of all, complacency, because complacency kills edge. It dulls discernment. It whispers, enough. And that's exactly when your vision starts to narrow, when your mental sharpness starts to rust. The moment you believe you've arrived is the moment you start falling behind. Because the world is always shifting, reality never stops moving, and knowledge that doesn't evolve becomes irrelevant. In a world changing this fast, the curious mind will always outlast the comfortable one. The Stoics understood this intimately. They prized adaptability, and curiosity was its engine. They weren't content to believe what they believed. They asked, does this still hold up? Is this still true under new light, new experiences, New evidence? Curiosity wasn't just the beginning of their wisdom. It was the constant renewal of it. Because without curiosity, there is no progress, no depth, no truth, only repetition. When curiosity is alive, the mind stays supple. But when curiosity dies, the mind begins to harden, and a hardened mind becomes pretty easily broken, easily manipulated, unable to adapt. But a curious mind, it is expansive, open, resilient. It prepares itself not just for answers, but for uncertainty. It does not freeze in the face of the unknown. It leans in. It explores. It grows. A curious mind is a prepared mind. And a prepared mind is a flexible one, able to bend without breaking, adjust under pressure, evolve with time, and navigate complexity with clarity. Such a mind cannot be trapped by ideology. It cannot be frozen by outdated tradition. It cannot be manipulated by fear. Why? Because it knows how to question bravely, reflect deeply, and grow endlessly. At the end of each week, pause. Write down 3 things you've learned. Then write down 3 things you're still unsure about. Don't rush to resolve the uncertainty. Sit with it. Let your curiosity pull you into exploration. Let wonder become your fuel. Chapter 9. Fortify the body. Sharpen the edged Stoics didn't treat the body and the mind as separate. They trained both relentlessly. Epictetus, even while living with a crippled leg, taught that the body must be disciplined, not worshipped. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor and general, never abandoned the importance of physical fortitude. To them, the body was not a temple for vanity, it was a forge for the will, a training ground for resilience. To be dangerously smart is not just to sharpen the mind. It is to steel the body, a sharp sword. After all, still needs a strong sheath. Intelligence becomes more powerful when housed in a vessel capable of withstanding pressure. Because when you train the body, you train your resolve. You develop the ability to act while tired, to think while under pressure, to stay grounded while the world around you spirals. This is not about muscles for the mirror. It's about building an engine for endurance. It's not vanity. It's preparation. When your body is strong, your mind is free. It doesn't have to worry about weakness, fatigue, or pain. It can stay sharp. It can stay clear. It can lead. Discipline in the body reinforces discipline in the mind. The dangerously smart don't chase aesthetics. They pursue readiness. They understand something most overlook. You are less likely to be manipulated when your body is under your command. You are less likely to panic when your breath is steady. You are less likely to fold when your foundation mental and physical is strong. When your physical discipline aligns with your mental clarity, you become a unified force. You walk differently. You breathe with intention. You listen with laser focus. Your presence stabilizes the room not because you speak loudly, but because you are not easily shaken. A fit body doesn't just project strength, it confirms it. It's living evidence of hours spent choosing consistency over comfort. It reflects the quiet promise you made to yourself to show up especially when no one was watching. It shows that you can do what needs to be done even when it's inconvenient, even when it's painful. That matters because a strong body reinforces a strong identity. It tells your mind, we can handle more. We are not fragile. We are trained for difficulty. And once that message takes root, fear begins to lose its grip. Not because you become invincible, but because you've made peace with discomfort. And that makes you dangerous in the best way. It makes you the one others count on in crisis. The one who keeps breathing when everyone else panics. The one who remains focused under fire. The one who acts decisively when hesitation would cost everything. In any high-stakes moment, the person most in control of themselves becomes the one who leads. Not the loudest, not the strongest, the most composed. And that composure begins with the body. Train it, discipline it. Don't just sharpen your thoughts, sharpen the edge of your presence. Because the kind of calm that can't be broken, it's not made in meditation rooms. It's made under pressure, under weight, under repetition. It's not about being the most jacked person in the room. It's about being the most unshakable. The one who suffers without complaint. The one who breathes through pain. The one who acts when it matters most. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It is built, and it starts with the body. Set a non-negotiable physical routine. This is not optional. It is your daily appointment with discomfort. Show up, train, repeat. Not for the mirror, but for the moments that will test your core. Because when your body is forged, your mind becomes unstoppable. With discipline that cannot be rescheduled, cannot be negotiated, and cannot be delayed. It doesn't need to be extreme. You don't need to run marathons or lift world record weight. But it must be consistent. It must cost you something. It must demand your focus, your sweat, and your patience. It must meet you exactly where you are, and then challenge you to go a step beyond. Train daily. Not for the abs, not for the mirror. Train for the mind. Let every push-up, every rep, every step become a lesson in willpower. Use the strain as a teacher. Use the discipline as a ritual. Let your workouts be sermons. In perseverance. It's not just about starting. Anyone can start. What counts is your willingness to continue after it hurts. After the mind says, that's enough. After the comfort calls you back. That's when you push. One more time. That's where the edge sharpens. Make discomfort your ally. Let it teach you something about resilience, about grit, about what you're really made of. Make sweat your signature, effort your devotion, and pain not your enemy, but your initiation. Because pain is not punishment. It is feedback. It is the sound of transformation echoing through your muscles, your lungs, your spirit. It is the sharpening stone for the blade of your will. Embrace it, and your body will follow. Your mind will rise, and your spirit will no longer tremble. You will become unshakable. Chapter 10. Master yourself, and no one can touch you. This is it. The final form of dangerous intelligence, self-mastery, when you are in command of your thoughts, your words, your impulses, your time, your habits. You become untouchable. There is no lever left for the world to pull, no button to press, no weakness to exploit. When you master yourself, you walk with a quiet, formidable power. You no longer need the applause. You're immune to flattery, Insults pass through you like wind through stone. You have become what the Stoics described, a fortress within the storm, not immovable from stubbornness, but unshaken from clarity, not hard from cynicism, but firm from truth. People always wonder how to be powerful. The Stoics answered not with theory, but with example. They showed us that real power is internal. It's not about dominance, it's about discipline. Not about appearance, but integrity. Not about having control over others, but never losing control of yourself. Real power is this: to choose your response regardless of the chaos around you. To remain deeply principled, fiercely calm, and relentlessly prepared. A person like this doesn't need to prove anything. They don't posture. They don't panic. They are underestimated until it's too late, because they never underestimate themselves. To master yourself is not to become cold. It is to become clear, to speak only when it matters, to act only when it counts, to observe without judgment, to choose your battles with precision, to live with focus, and to move like someone who needs no permission. Self-mastery is not rebellion. It is inner order. It is not loud. It does not seek attention. It is not about control over others. It is the quiet knowing that you control yourself, and that is more than enough. Start where you are. Audit your daily habits. Where do you leak power? Where do you act on impulse? Where do you waste time, speak without thinking, scroll without reason? Pick one of those areas. Fix it. Then tomorrow, fix one more. The road to mastery is not paved with grand victories. It is built through small, deliberate, daily choices, again and again, brick by brick. And one day, without announcement or ceremony, you look around and realize you are not who you were. You are sharper, stronger, quieter, clearer, wiser, not untouchable because of arrogance, but because of discipline, because you have become the kind of person the world cannot easily deceive, derail, or define. You have become the most dangerous kind of intelligent, unshakable, unflinching, unstoppable. Stay sharp, stay disciplined, stay dangerous. The world won't see you coming, but when you arrive, they'll never forget you.